Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today's session. This session is being recorded. It will be turned off when we reach the question and answer portion, and the webinar will be available to you for future use on our YouTube channel. For your convenience, the link will be sent out after the webinar. So again, thank you for attending today's session. The goal of today's webinar is to provide a brief overview and understanding of the budget and financial reporting with regards to the National School Lunch Program. So as you're starting to get into your budget cycle, ending up this current school year and moving on to the next year, the Nevada Department of Agriculture just wanted to provide you with some tools so you can move ahead with the planning. So the sources of revenue in a school nutrition budget mostly come from local sources or student income, state sources, perhaps if you've been a recipient of grant funding, federal resources such as the National School Lunch Program reimbursement, miscellaneous sources such as PTA funds, which may help supplement your program, and fund transfers in. So the purpose of the revenue slide is to give you information on sources of revenue for the National School Lunch Program. And sources of revenue in our program usually come from local sources such as student income, possibly state sources such as grant funds, federal sources, any reimbursement from the National School Lunch Programs, miscellaneous sources such as PTA funds, and fund transfers in. Usually this is from the general fund of your district. Sources of expenditure usually include labor, any salary, extra duty, overtime pay, substitute pay, also the employee benefit load, such as health and welfare benefits, retirement benefits, workers' compensation. Anything you may or may not see may be hitting your budget. Purchased foods, including the USDA, formerly known as commodity foods, supplies and disposables, contracted services, such as repairs or anything done out of the house that your district can't provide the services for, capital assets, such as equipment, major purchases that you may have with some of your equipment, travel and professional development, a miscellaneous, and possibly some indirect costs, which would be charges that your district may be applying to your budget for some of the overhead charges. One thing you will want to start to gather this time of year is types of financial reports. And the most helpful ones to you at this time would be a profit and loss statement, which is a P&L, a statement of net position, which would show your net assets. It's also called a balance sheet, your current year budget as you start to develop the budget for the next school year. Types of financial reports, what you want to look for is your revenue by source, which would be a reporting that breaks out the types of revenue, such as your federal and local reimbursements. Expenditures by category, so you can really see where your money's being spent. And kind of a net gain and loss for the statement period. These may be available to you on a monthly and an annual basis from your district. Comparing of a current month with a previous month's information, and also a year-to-date information. A statement of a net position would also show you your assets. So the assets in the school nutrition is anything of value. For example, the cash balance you have on hand, any receivables that are due to you. For example, if you've already submitted a claim for the month of February, but have received payment yet on your books, that would be an accounts receivable. As well as the value of all your inventories, and for the most part, this is your food supply. Liabilities would be anything you have that you have not paid for yet. For example, your food and supply invoices, and possibly any sales tax that you may have collected but have not filed for. And also your fund balance, which gives you a general idea of whether you're in the positive or in the negative at any given time during the school year. The school nutrition budget is a very important piece to this picture. And what it can do is assist you in managing your program in a number of ways. Your school budget is really a working tool that should help guide you throughout the school year by forecasting the revenue that you're anticipating for the year, identifying how your revenue will be spent, and then predicting how much money will be in the fund balance at the year's end. Again, budgets can change based on participation, enrollment, and other various factors, but at least it gives you a very good starting point of where your department will be during the school year and what you predict for the future. One important area to start looking at, if you haven't already, is really trying to look at your program in terms of a meal equivalent. And what you can do is, as you start to break down your food sales from your big picture down to a smaller picture, if you start looking at meal equivalents, you can start to determine what your meal cost is. How productive is your school district and your school program by looking at labor productivity ratios and the average revenue earned per meal or meal equivalent. And so we're going to be going through a few conversions where you can start as a talking point to really look at your school program. So to figure out a meal equivalent conversion, what it is ratios. So if you start with 1 lunch equals 1 meal equivalent, you can use that as the basis. You can take 3 breakfasts and convert that to 2 meal equivalents, or 2/3 value. 3 snacks are usually equal to 1 meal equivalent, or 1/3. And for those of you that have a supper program, that would also equal 1 meal equivalent. And then a second number you'll want to start to look at is a productivity number, which would be your meals per labor hour. So once you figure out how many meals and meal equivalents you have, you can divide that by the number of labor hours to see how productive each of your kitchens are. For example, if you have a kitchen that produces 338 meals and meal equivalents, and you have a total of 24 paid labor hours per day, which would include possibly your manager, your cooks, and your food service workers, you can do a simple division program, which would result in 338 divided by 24. You would get 14.08, or 14 meals per labor hour. And the result would give you a ratio, so you're able to start to compare your kitchens and your sites within your own district. So, for example, if you start to look at these numbers, you can start to determine if you have a kitchen that is more or less productive as you start to look into your budgeting for the next year and your staffing. And again, kind of comparing your operation, realizing that your staffing and your meal costs can vary depending on the type of meal service you have provided. For example, if you have a lot of elementary versus secondary schools, as most of you know, that's easier to staff than a secondary school. There's usually less prep involved and possibly less menu selections. If you have a central kitchen versus satellite operations, you may have higher labor costs as opposed to a satellite operation with a heat and serve, keeping in mind that you still need one person no matter how many meals you're going to be producing during the day. Does your operation have single line or multiple lines or food stations? As you know, those do require the multiple lines more staffing than a single line operation. And also within the state of Nevada, the geographic location may affect your travel time, whether your kitchens are close or far apart as you're traveling, especially in relation to food delivery and charges you may be charged from your vendors and your suppliers. So you need to at least start to compare the operation with what your setup is and where you can kind of start to make changes if you need them within your school food operation. So the types of expenditure analysis that you'll want to look at is what are your total costs to produce a meal. So the bulk of the total cost to produce a meal would have to include your labor, your food costs, your supply costs, and any other costs associated with that meal. So you can start to work with your business and finance people to start to gather some of these costs so you can start to look at what those costs are per meal by site and within your district. For example, the total cost to produce your meal might be $3.10, but the average reimbursement that you're coming in on the income portion might be $3.06, resulting in a loss of 4 cents per meal for the budget. And the end result would be a budget deficit for your program. And once you're able to start to determine what some of these bigger costs are, then you can start to drill down to see if you need to address some of the costs associated with your meals, such as the food items, the supplies, or any labor issues. So again, comparing your budget, when you look at your expenditures, you have to compare it to your revenues and looking at that total net gain or loss to the school nutrition program in terms of a dollar amount or a percentage amount. And then what is that net gain or loss per meal or meal equivalent? And each school district is going to be slightly different for the factors mentioned earlier. So I know everyone wants to start to increase revenue. And when you start to increase revenue, one important tool that you're going to want at your fingertips is using participation as a management tool. And one area to address is really looking at the waste. So once you start to determine what your meals per labor hour are in each of your sites, you can start to look at that excess labor hours in terms of the labor piece, or the second piece would be the food and supply budget. Are you overproducing food, or can you possibly start to use those leftovers more efficiently? Also reducing customer satisfaction. If you don't have enough staff or if you have a very long line, some of your customers may be choosing not to participate in your National School Lunch Program. And of most important is not identifying how many customers you have, but identifying how many potential customers are you not serving each day. And we're going to get to that in a couple slides when we start to have you take a look at your free and reduced data. And then looking at setting revenue goals for yourself and what's realistic in your kitchens to increase that participation. Is it a 5% growth? Or maybe it would be something as small as even a 2% growth, but that could increase revenue over the course of 180 school days. So ways to increase revenue, of course, everyone wants to increase participation in sales, but one area that you may want to check into is those early release days and field trips. having the discussion ahead of time with the principals to make sure that the lunch service is included before the students are released for the day, and then trying to streamline a process for you for field trips with a flyer perhaps that you're sending out with a 24 advance notice, so you can try and capture all those free and reduced meals when the students are off on a field trip. And again, looking at that free and reduced participation data on all your claims. All your claims that you've submitted give you a really good indicator of trends in your district. Where are you reaching the kids, and which students are choosing not to participate and why? For example, on your free and reduced data, if you have a very high free and reduced percentages, then hopefully you're able to capture all those meals on a monthly basis, and so that would have a very high free and reduced participation rate. Take a look at your breakfast programs. Are you able to add a breakfast in the classroom? Perhaps you want to just maybe set up a grab-and-go cart at some of your secondary schools, or maybe adding a second chance breakfast if a lot of students are getting to school late and you want to have another opportunity to try and capture that breakfast meal. Or perhaps you just need to start with a breakfast program at more of your kitchen sites that aren't offering breakfast at all. Other areas might be, if you feel like you're capturing all your national school lunch meals, is looking at a catering program. And the easiest way to start would be more of your staff in services, that they could start to purchase the food from food service. Adding contract meals, such as preschools in the area that don't have an adequate kitchen supply, having a vended meal available to them where they could come and pick up the meals from your school kitchen and you could charge them with a vended contract. And the kindergarten classes that are not there for a full day, that was an area to capture the meals if there were any half-day kindergartens that weren't able to stay for lunch. One area of looking at, again, is the pricing models and utilizing the USDA tools to see if your pricing is in line with what you should be charging for that meal. And then a big area is looking at that CEP option for your district and or schools, and combining schools to make a CEP option available. So ways to decrease expenses, again, looking at that food cost, your portion controls, really analyzing your per meal cost data, looking at your inventory. The inventory should be turned over frequently, and you should be having a small amount as possible on hand, especially as you start moving into the summer months. Your ordering processes, are you able to streamline ordering or break cases up so not every school kitchen is having a supply of food on hand when they can take smaller portions? How are you preparing your food? Are you fully utilizing your USDA foods, or are you leaving money on the table at the end of the year? What about your extras and your condiments? All those are adding charges anywhere from a penny to a nickel per meal cost, and those need to be carefully monitored. And are you involving all your staff with the process and ways to decrease the expenses? And again, looking at your labor cost, once you start to look at your productivity by the site and staffing levels, that would maybe help you determine if you should either add a staff, transfer a staff, or possibly reduce staffing levels for the start of the school year. Take a look at those extra hours that the employees are putting in, overtime and non-contract days, and your substitute labor pool to really take a look at your labor costs. Other ways to decrease expenses would be the early release days. Definitely look at your staffing, especially the substitutes. Consider offer versus serve, which is the meal concept. You do need less food needed for that reimbursable meal, but once you start to get the offer versus serve portions down, There have been significant decreases in the food cost portion of your budget. Also looking at your charging policy. Are you doing the best you can within your abilities on your collection efforts with the money that has been charged on student accounts by your families? And what about staff meals? Are you fully able to collect from all the employees for that $3 lunch or $3.50 lunch? So again, moving forward, we just wanted to know we will be posting some more resources on our Nevada Department of Agriculture Food and Nutrition Division. There are websites available at the National Food Safety Management Institute, one designed specifically for directors, and then also utilizing your district's business manager and finance officer as you start to move into this budget period. And the goal of our state and with the Nevada Department of Agriculture is to make you be fiscally solvent for the National School Lunch Programs. So with that, we're going to move ahead into the next portion of our webinar.
All right, thank you, Rose. That was a great budget webinar. Provided a lot of great information. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we are going to talk about the direct certification reporting requirements for this current school year. And we'll take questions at the end. So again, this is Catrina Peters. I'm our School Nutrition Services Manager, and we have just a few more minutes. We're going to quickly cover the direct certification reporting requirements, and we'll go through the spreadsheet and show you exactly how to enter that information we'll be asking you to send to us. Okay, so what are the requirements? Per federal regulations, the Nevada Department of Agriculture, so that's us, we're required to provide notification for each district that at a district-wide level has at least 40% of students that are a direct certification match, and also districts that are between 30 and 40% direct certification matches. And this year, those notification letters have already been sent out. So if your district falls into that category, we have sent you that notification letter. And to sort out who fell into that category, we use data off of your verification summary. So that was the report that you filled out in CNP and submitted to us. We use that as a proxy. So we use the total DC matches that you had in there, and that's just to notify you that at a district-wide level you meet certain benchmarks. School districts, so that's you, you're required to provide notification on that school-level data. So you're going to be providing us information at a school level that reflects your direct certification matches as of April 1st. And we're going to go step by step through the spreadsheet that we'll be asking you to complete and submit back to us. We're also required to use this data to publish a report on the ISP identified student percentage at each school. So this information that comes from you on the school level direct certification match percentages, we'll then be rolling that into a report similar to our free and reduced eligibility report and posting that on our website. Okay, to talk briefly about how this information will be used. As I said, the data that you submit will be published on our website, and we'll be using that data to determine who's eligible to participate in the community eligibility provision. And if you elect to pursue the community eligibility provision, this data will drive what your claiming percentage is. And we want to let folks know that there's been a huge national interest in support of expanded community eligibility provision. There's strong support from hunger advocates both here in our state and nationwide. There's a lot of support from elected officials, again, both national and statewide, and also members of the general public. So folks are really supportive of expanding that community eligibility provision, and there's a lot of interest and requests from the community for that data. Okay, so next we see a spreadsheet, And this is very similar to the spreadsheet we sent to each district last year. So we made a few modifications based on the feedback that we got from everyone that submitted it. We've revised this form, and shortly after this webinar, Shauna, our new admin assistant, is going to be emailing each district your spreadsheet. And we're only sending just one spreadsheet per district. So last year it kind of had everybody all on one. This year we've pared that down and you just have one sheet for your district. We've automatically populated it with all the names of schools in your district and a school code. So that piece has already been completed for you. And this data that you're going to be entering is data as of April 1st. So this is data as of what you have on file today. And to dive in a little closer to this spreadsheet, let's see if I can get my pointer going here. So here in this column D, we see total enrollment. And you're going to want to enter in your total enrollment as of April 1st, and that's everybody in the whole school. So that's free and reduced, no matter what type of free and reduced they were qualified through, and paper applications, your paid students, all students enrolled in that particular school. The next column is going to be this column E. Those are going to be your direct certifications through SNAP. So those are going to be the children that you were able to qualify as free. Through that list you pull off Mustang, and as I'm sure everybody knows, that's all matches that under the program column have anything other than just an A. If they have just an A under the program column, those students you're going to total up and reflect under this column F, the direct certification through TANF column. The next column, that column G we see here, is that total homeless and runaway. So all students that your homeless and runaway coordinator has sent over to you, you're going to total up those students and enter that information in per school. Our next column, column H, is going to be our total migrant. Some districts have a lot of students that qualify for that migrant status. Some districts have very few, possibly even none. So you just want to reflect those numbers for that school site. The next is going to be column I, and these are going to be students that you matched off your FDPIR list. So that's going to be that FDPIR list that we provide for you off the Mustang site. You're going to total that up by school and enter that number in on that I column. The next column, column J, is going to be your total free and reduced students. So this is going to be all the students through all DC match types. That's column E, F, G, H, and I. And then you're also going to add in the students that you qualified through a paper application. So any of your kids that have a paper application on file and were qualified for free and reduced, total all your free and reduced kids all together, and you'll enter that number in by school site on column J. That final column, column K, has been formatted so that once you enter in all those cells that are shaded in that yellow color, your identified student percentage will automatically populate itself in that column K. So we've already formatted that for you. As long as you're filling out shaded cells, you should get a nice, tidy identified student percentage automatically in column K. All right, so that's our spreadsheet. We're going to go ahead and move on to answer some questions about when is it due. So again, I want to repeat that we want you to be entering information into that spreadsheet for what you had on file as of April 1. You're going to complete those spreadsheets, and we want you to submit them by close of business on April 10th. So we do have kind of a tight turnaround. We have to turn this data around and publish that report and report to USDA. And we want you to go ahead and send those completed spreadsheets to Shauna. And I provided her email address here. She'll also be the one that sends the spreadsheet to you. The next question, will we have to complete this spreadsheet next year? The answer to that is yes. There was a requirement to do it last year, you're required to do it this year, and we don't see that requirement changing for the foreseeable future. So this will likely be an annual reporting requirement. We also want to remind folks that the deadline to adopt that community eligibility provision for school year 15-16, so the coming school year, has also been extended to August 31st. So the federal regulations initially said that the deadline was going to be July 1. USDA has pushed that back again, and you have until August 31st to elect to adopt CEP. So we're real excited about that option, and we hope that that'll encourage folks to adopt CEP as is feasible. If you need a little bit of a refresher on the community eligibility provision and how counting and claiming percentages work, the requirements for serving breakfast and lunch for free, I provided the link to the webinar that we did that's posted on our YouTube channel. So that webinar will give you kind of the ins and outs of CEP if you need a little refresher. On our next slide, I'll provide contact information, but you can also always reach out to our office to get questions answered. We can assist you in running some calculations on whether or not it's feasible. Okay, so on our next slide, we have contact info. If you need any assistance with completing the spreadsheet, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, and I've included my contact information. I've also included Rose's info on this slide, and she's also a great resource. Again, we're happy to help in completing a calculator to determine financial feasibility or provide any assistance that's needed in completing that spreadsheet. I've also included Shauna's email address and phone number. You'll want to return those completed spreadsheets to her again by April 10th.